Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 21st meeting of the Millis School Committee. I am Carrie Roach. I am the current chair. I will start by letting everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and it is available on YouTube to be viewed. I'm going to first start with attendance. Mark Conroy. Mark Conroy.
Here, sorry.
Robin Briggs.
Here.
Steve Catalano.
He
Did he disappear?
He's gone.
No, he's there.
Oh.
He's on mute.
See him. I don't see him on the screen.
He's there. Steve,
I see him.
you want to wave?
Oh, there he is. Hold on.
Can you hear us, Steve? We can't hear you.
Don't read his.
Right. We'll give you a minute. How about we go to Denise Gibbons?
Here.
Can you hear me now?
Nah, yes, we can hear you. You are here.
All of you should ask me to be on mute, but sorry about that.
And Superintendent Nancy Gustafson.
Here.
Great. We do not have teacher or student reps here this evening. Open session, there is a chat feature on the YouTube box. So after the presentation, so if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in there. And when the presentation is over, we'll go to the questions and answer all of them. So that being said, I think we're gonna skip around on the agenda a little bit tonight. We'll start with the consideration to approve the 7/14 school committee meeting minutes.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
I make a motion to approve the 7/14/2020 school committee meeting minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we're going to get right into the superintendent's report with the fall reopening plan. So Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you and the team.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have titled it the Fall Reopening Planning Outline because this is still very much a moving target in terms of we're getting guidance daily. Basically, we received more information today. So we are here this evening to provide an update on the tremendous amount of planning that has been done by the team and our advisory groups. Next slide, Jen. We've had 10 advisory groups meeting with staff representation from a lot of the stakeholder groups, meeting intensely for the past month. Of course, administrators started meeting much earlier than that to discuss our fall reopening plans, and we've been conferring all along the way with other staff members. We also have building-based subcommittees that have been formed with parent representatives. If you recall, the DESE guidance came out originally on June 25th, but we're still awaiting more of the final guidance. We then surveyed parents and received valuable feedback in a survey that went out at the end of June. And we have now received finally from the Department of Education the process for the reopening plans that are twofold. One, the first part of what's called the feasibility study is due to the Department of Education on July 31st. And these came to us on July 15th. So we have a couple weeks, although we knew it was coming, in terms of figuring out the feasibility of how we can accommodate students in the building. And then we are to submit 3 plans to the Department of Education by August 10th, a plan for how we could get all students in person, a plan for hybrid learning with approximately 50% in Millis, it will be about 50% of students in at a time, and then a fully remote plan. Jen, thank you. I'd like to thank all of our advisory group members who have spent a lot of time and thought very deeply about these ideas and helped us develop the ideas for those, for this preliminary draft plan. Diane Dennehy, Marianne Zemba, Tim Howden, Steve Bigelow, Tricia White, Ann Veluzzi, Terry Bedard, and Shannon Graham, and Lynn Molinari. Also Sandy Labarge and Sean Fallon and Jean Noonan, the directors of Transportation, Food Services, and Extended Day. And also our parent representatives, Denise Trubiano and Tricia Berube, Brandy Chetsas and Bill Balboni at the high school, and at Clyde Brown, Jamie Scavone, Pamela Ahmad, and Jessica Peterson. These are the broad categories of our district advisory groups that have been meeting. And within each of those categories, you can imagine that there are many levels and layers of subcategories within those. As we have been researching, reading everything we can get our hands on, and then discussing this, we have come up with what we think is a very good preliminary plan. Next slide, which is a phased-in hybrid model, similar to what the Mass Teachers Association has put forth. And what we saw in that, we really liked. Phase 1 would be that teachers and staff return, and that would probably be the first week of school start, or first week of what would have been our school year starting August 27th. And that would be for staff only. There's a tremendous amount of training and planning that needs to happen. We need to set up our learning spaces, have teachers set up their learning spaces, and start our family engagement, although knowing our teachers, it will have happened prior to that as well. And then the following week, which is after Labor Day, we would begin an orientation process with small groups of students and families coming in to help students orient to the new protocols, to the building, to answer questions, to connect with families. And as you can imagine, the social emotional wellness piece of this is very important. And throughout our planning, we've prioritized the social emotional well-being of our students. And then at some point, it could be that week, if all is going well, instruction would resume. So we're estimating, and all of this is still very preliminary, we're estimating that the orientation phase might be a day or two, and then instruction would begin in the hybrid model. And our hybrid model, after a lot of discussion and careful weighing of all the options, we're recommending a 2-day in-school model with 3 days remote. There will be two cohorts of kids with approximately 50% of students in each cohort. Those, of course, would be grouped by family so that families would be in the same cohort. And the reason we have landed on the 2 days consecutively versus an every other day model were for educational reasons and childcare reasons. Educationally, we believe our teachers also provided us with this feedback and input that they really thought that 2 consecutive days with students would provide better education, greater continuity and consistency for students. And then Wednesdays would be fully remote for everybody, with high need students attending in the morning, but fully remote in the morning, and then planning for teachers in the afternoon, much like our early release days, because this is going to take a tremendous amount of planning and preparation for teachers, because all along the way, as we've said several times, we believe we now know a lot more about how to do more effective hybrid and remote learning, and teachers have need the time to prepare the videos and all the instruction that will continue to happen for the students who are at home, because they will be in remote learning for the 2 days that the other cohort is in school. Next slide, please. Then, as we are able, and as we assess the trajectory of the virus with the public health guidance and our how things are going, the feedback we will be soliciting, we will then enter into what we call phase 4, which is taking a look and seeing if we can, how we need to adjust our model. It could be that by the end of September, we may be able to move more to a 100% in model. And I can say with all of our models, what we have determined during the feasibility study is that from preschool on up through grade 8, we are able to accommodate the students, 100% of our students, with a 6-foot distancing guideline. The high school is not yet able to, we have not yet solidified how we would do that at the high school. So we're still working on that. But K-8, it is a 6-foot in-class model, whereas, as you know, the Department of Education guidelines say from 3 to 6 feet. And we decided that we could actually, shoot for the 6 foot, and that is doable K-8. So the staff in this model would all be on site 5 days a week. And as I mentioned, Wednesdays, we would have some time set aside for the planning and preparation that goes into this. Next slide, please. So we did, back at the end of June, survey our families, and I'll have each principal speak briefly to the results of that initial survey. Tana Django. Are you on mute, Tana?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and let you know that I'm finding Millis a very welcoming place, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to work with such a collaborative group of administrators, staff, and families in such an outstanding district. The transition to Millis has been amazing. As was stated, we did do a survey in June to get feedback for our planning for the reopening in the fall. We had a total of 397 respondents for Clyde F. Brown, and I felt this was a very strong representation of the families. The majority of the respondents indicated their child would attend with a rate of 81.6%. Many of the unsure respondents indicated with safety measures in place, their child would attend. Out of the 397 responses, 20 would prefer a hybrid model of instruction and 20 would not attend in person, but would access the remote learning. Social distancing and the safety measures the school would implement were a common theme throughout the comments of the survey for Clyde F. Brown. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's Maureen Knowlton. I'm speaking to the middle school survey. Again, the survey went out a few weeks ago, and according to what you see there, it's showing 236 responses on the slide. But when I looked more closely at the data, I had to correct it because there are a lot of duplicates, and we actually had 205 responses, which I still believe is fairly strong given enrollment of about 275 last year. Overall, it was pretty clear that a majority of the families would like their children to return to school in person in some capacity with the safety requirements in place. So based on that responses, it's showing about 73% of middle school students would be returning to school, when actually I corrected the data, it was about 80%. In terms of actual numbers, 14 students, parents of 14 students said they would opt to keep their child fully remote, so about 7%. 19 students, families were undecided, about 9%, and 7 specifically commented that they'd like to or prefer a hybrid model, so that's about 3%. So potentially, right now, based on the data from the end of June, and we know that that could change given the situation as it's unfolding, but potentially we could have 41 students who might not attend school in person that we'd have to account for. We have a projected enrollment right now next year of 286 students, so that's about 20 or 14% of that projected enrollment. So again, those are based on assurances that we would comply with the recommended social distancing requirements of 3 to 6 feet. We're leaning towards 6 feet. Mask requirements, no large gatherings, frequent hand washing and sanitizing during the school day. So thank you.
Good evening, Bob Mulaney, high school principal. Our survey, obviously the graph that's shown is similar to that of the Clyde Brown parents and the middle school parents. We had we actually had 118 total responses in the high school. We had a late breaker. And of those respondents, 98 respondents said that their child would attend school in person. And that was with the 3 to 6 foot guidelines from the Department of Education. We had 3 families who said that their child would not be attending school, would be 100% remote of that 118. And the remainder of the respondents talked about it being, they're going to wait and see, wait until end of August. There were 5 respondents who preferred the hybrid model, and there were a couple families that said they weren't quite sure, and they might pursue the option of homeschooling as well.
Thank you very much. And I am so remiss in not introducing Tana directly as our wonderful new principal of the Clyde Brown. And she's been just a tremendous addition to the team. So I apologize for not introducing you before. So Diane Dennehy, our lead nurse, is going to speak to the health and wellness. And the nurses have done a tremendous amount of work, just incredible work. So we thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. So Lynn Molinari, myself, and Dr. Marks have been in consultation with DPH, with DESE, with our local nursing organizations, our school physician, and we came up with the following slide that for the in-person model, the health and safety PPE, which are the masks of face coverings, will be required for students above grade 2 and the adults. It will be highly encouraged for the students younger than that, but we're following the guidelines for the state that grade 2 and above will be wearing it. We worked with DESE and their recommended list of supplies, and we determined along with facilities what to order. And the direct service personnel and the custodians were also considered in the numbers. And we also have developed a PPE training that we're kind of using right now with the summer staff, and we will have a bigger and larger program for when the teachers come back. And that's the same for if it's a hybrid approach, and then for fully remote, it's obviously not applicable, except we will probably do it if the staff people come into school to get supplies or whatever. The big area that we were luckily able to do is the isolation space. Clyde Brown was fortunate enough to have a new building, so that was easy to accommodate. The middle school, high school health office now has been remodeled, and there is an isolation room which is adjacent to the health office, and the health office itself has been remodeled to make for proper flow. We are doing protocols right now in response to illness staff and student staff and family staff. And that's, again, the same for in-person and hybrid, and not applicable right now for fully remote. And then our training for staff, which will be the first week of school, will be multifaceted. It will be virtual, it will be slideshows, it'll be links to CDC videos, there'll be in-person demonstrations, and there will be a sign-off, so it's mandatory training. It will cover hand washing, hand sanitizing, how COVID-19, just a reminder how COVID-19 is spread, or how we think it's spread, symptoms of COVID-19. There'll be staff training on first aid, because they will be doing some first aid in the classrooms just to cut down the traffic to the nursing offices. It will cover the infrared thermometer use, and then there'll be some pretty significant training with the direct providers, those who will be coming within 3 feet of the students. For example, toileting and how to cover for that, and that's for in-person and hybrid, and obviously not applicable for fully remote.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is Jen Starr. Hope you can hear me okay. We are continuing to work on the equitable access to devices for students, and what we've come up with for in-person, hybrid, and fully remote is pretty similar for when it comes to devices. All of the students need to have a mobile device that isn't shared. So in K and 1, we'll be assigning one-to-one iPads. Grades 2 through 6 will have Chromebooks assigned one-to-one. We'll continue with iPads in grades 7 and 8, and all of the high school grades 9 through 12 will have Chromebooks. The biggest piece of this is that making sure that students have a device in school to use that is assigned to them and not shared, but also having that device to be able to bring home for those remote learning days. Another piece of that is continuing to provide hotspot technology for any families who need internet access. And Joan, I think you're going to talk about professional learning.
I am. This is Joan Lynn. I'm the Director of Curriculum, and I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the professional development and professional learning for our staff. As Diane Denny had just mentioned, for the in-person and hybrid, we'll have some PPE training, and we'll have some first aid opportunities for teachers to learn some new things that they're going to have to be helping with the responsibility for in their classrooms and getting everybody safely to where they need to be. So that'll take a couple of, a good chunk of time as we get back into school. That will not, obviously, as Diane said, does not have to take place for the fully remote, but there will be the in-person and the hybrid model for that. The second piece of this is a course that all of our staff, all of our teachers and administrators have been taking over the summer, and it's a modern classroom essentials class. And basically it breaks down into 3 parts. And so they're learning some more about creating high quality blended instruction, designing effective self-paced structures, and teaching and grading for mastery. We've done a lot with blended learning, certainly at the middle school and high school, but that was not always the mode that we used for elementary students. And we always want to do the best that we can, and we believe everybody can continually learn. And so part of this course has to do with helping staff to create instructional videos and increasing engagement of students for those videos, as well as meeting the individual needs through self-pacing, as well as tracking their progress as they move through that. Clearly that will have an impact on the hybrid model and the fully remote model, more so than if we're in school and in person. But we, as somebody has repeatedly said throughout this, people, that we are planning for a variety of options for ourselves. In addition to that, we've been continuing to enhance our Google Suite PD for staff. We want to make sure folks know how to use the equipment that they will need to use for instructional purposes, and again, how to enhance what they're already doing. And Dr. Marks is now going to talk about teaching and learning for special education.
Hello, everyone. Sue Ann Marks, and I'm going to talk a little bit about special education. And I have to admit that special education got a head start this spring. So many of the things I'm talking about are protocols or processes that the Department of Education encouraged or required us to put in place in the spring. So for many of our families, this will look familiar. So we're going to have a strong emphasis on delivering in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible with all of our students, whether we're in an in-person or a hybrid model. We'll be delivering all of the IEP services, and some of them will have to be sometimes remote, but that will be a conversation we want to have deliberately with families over time about the fit and student engagement involved. We will also be, in that delivery of IEP services, coming within 3 feet of some students who have very specific needs. And for those populations, staff will have extra training and still be providing those accommodations, but they'll have extra protective equipment and extra training on how to do things most safely, and which will include sanitizing, etc. For the hybrid model, this is the same, mostly all in person, and we will continue to prioritize in-person services for most students with IEPs. When it comes to team meetings, we will begin by looking at the backlog of team meetings that was left over from the spring. When parents and families were willing to have remote meetings, we had those, but some of them chose to delay that process, hoping we could have in-person meetings in the fall. We still are going to prefer to continue remotely, because we're in the interest of keeping the traffic in the buildings down. But if parents want to have live meetings, we will do that. When it comes to the hybrid model, that means that we aren't opening our schools fully. We would continue to offer the remote IEPs and then actually remote IEP meetings, and encourage that with families as well. Let's see, and I should mention that we're adhering to the regulatory timeline. So this very specific timelines to evaluation and to our responses, and when we need to hold a team meeting and when we need to have an IEP to families. And we are following all those timelines. It took us a while in the spring to get our systems up and running, but we believe that we're fully capable of doing that, and have had a lot of support from families in the best ways to reach and share information. And lastly, and probably foremost, is parent engagement. So this CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, was key this spring in helping us to look at materials that we were sending out, making sure that they were parent friendly, that the way we were approaching team meetings when we were doing them virtually was helpful and was still allowing for the important conversations to happen. one of the priorities when we do get back in school is that providers of all services and IEPs will be reaching out to families early, and will be sharing what we believe to be the schedules. And we're hoping that schedules for services stay in place, whether we're fully live, in person, or hybrid. And let's see, and one of the other things we are once again planning to implement is to have office hours where families know that they can reach out to teachers and have some collaboration time. And sometimes it's even students who want an off the side conversation with teachers to work some things out. So office hours seems to be a practice that was well received. I think that's about it. I just wanted to mention, we are completing some evaluations over the course of the summer, things that couldn't happen because some of our initial evaluations especially have to be by necessity, so we understand fully what the students need. They need to be in person. So we are piloting this summer practices for a safe evaluation, and we'll be also working with staff over the course of the first few weeks to implement those for students that we'll be evaluating, because that evaluation does require us to get within 3 feet. So it's a plexiglass and masking and the different things like that to make sure that we're doing things as safely and carefully as possible and getting good results. Thank you.
Good evening, it's John Engler, Director of Operations. For the facility aspect of things, we went ahead and as far as in-person scenario goes, as you've already heard, K through 8, we can fit everyone in up to 6 feet. High school, we're still working on making sure by utilizing other areas of the school, possibly outside areas, to see if we could possibly keep everyone within 6 feet and be fully compliant. As the next part, as far as the repurposing alternate spaces, again, we're looking into the gym, auditorium, possibly the library, and music rooms to see if we can bring everyone in the high school up to a 6-foot distance. We are looking at other options as far as using outside areas. We're looking at purchasing possible tents or renting some tents to give people in breaks where they can leave rooms if need be, possibly have mask breaks, so to speak. The arrival dismissal procedures, we are still working on those. We are waiting to still see what we have as far as the scheduling that we might be going forward with. Again, we're still looking for some guidance, but we will continue to keep the social distancing and hand sanitizers before people enter these buildings, as well as signage. Cleaning and ventilation. We are verifying that the solutions that we do have are compliant and are disinfectants that will kill the germs that are needed. We are looking at different protocols and lists that we can put together, putting schedules together once we realize when kids are in rooms, and as far as sanitizing bathrooms, common space areas on at least a quarterly basis throughout the school. Hybrid, everything is pretty much the same as I just mentioned. If we are to either be if we are in person as well. I believe Elise Malloy is next.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, John. Hello, I'm Elise Malloy. I'm the assistant principal and school counselor at Clyde F. Brown Elementary School. And I'm here tonight representing the social emotional wellness subgroup. The subgroup consisted of members of our social emotional learning, professional learning community, as well as Shannon Graham, and in addition to Sean Seibert, April Lehman, Aaron Sullivan, Jennifer Letton, and Kelly Annunziato. As Nancy mentioned, the Millis Public Schools priority focus is on social emotional wellness of our students. And the Millis Public Schools social emotional team will continue to utilize our 3-tiered systems of supports to provide social, emotional, and behavioral supports to all students. The three-tiered model consists of 3 different options for students. A tier 1 model provides interventions for all students. Some examples of tier 1 interventions include positive behavior support programs, social emotional learning classroom lessons for all students at all levels, and advisory programs at the middle school and high school. For our tier 2, that consists of some students and can provide social emotional learnings for individuals and small groups based on specific needs. Our tier 3 is for interventions are for a few students. They're strategic, targeted, and longer term to provide social emotional learning and supports for identified students. This might involve individual counseling, case management, and programming. All of these 3 models will continue as they have in the past in person. In the hybrid model, the tier 1 lessons would continue in person during school days when we're in school. And if we're fully remote, they would go to virtual. So our PBIS programs, social emotional learning classroom lessons, and advisory programs would still continue. Our tier 2 and tier 3 interventions of small groups or individual counseling would be prioritized, similar to what Dr. Marks mentioned for special education, to provide in-person services in school on a case-by-case basis. If we were remote, those would also continue in small group or individual sessions virtually. The Millis Public Schools social emotional team has consistently utilized assessments and collaboration to support students and staff. We conduct regular social emotional behavioral screenings at multiple times during the school year to identify students in need of support. Counselors and staff utilize these assessments, as well as collaboration with staff within the buildings, to determine the best supports and intervention for all students. These assessments and collaborative supports would continue in both the in-person, hybrid, and fully remote models. One of the biggest important factors is supporting families and parents and guardians. By providing support and resources to parents and guardians, they can in turn better support their children with social, emotional, and behavioral needs. The Millis Public Schools will continue to support parents through the following measures. We're going to provide parents with parent resources on social emotional topics. We'll provide an explanation of our tiered systems of support more in depth. We will also provide case consultation and management through emails, phone calls, and virtual meetings if we were remote. We're also looking into the possibility of providing virtual parent groups and trainings to support the social emotional needs of our students and families. In addition to parent and guardian resources and trainings, it will be critical for us to also support our staff through trainings and resources. We will be providing staff with supports of students as they return to school, regardless of whether we are in person, hybrid, or remote. These trainings and resources will be provided to staff prior to the start of the school year in the following areas. We will be looking to provide training and resources focused on student adjustments and needs as they return to school. We will be providing resources for resilience, relationship building, and other social emotional learning topics. And we will also outline for staff the plan and process for any time they see a student who would be in need of social emotional support. And now I'm going to turn this over to Terry, who is going to talk about operations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is Terry Wiggett. I'm the business manager. And we have really 3 different areas in operations, but they all really have one common thread, and that is plans that relate to all of them. We started with transportation, and part of the reason we started there is there was some summer guidance that required us to develop a transportation plan. So even though there has not been formal guidance yet issued for the fall, we have worked out a transportation plan based on that summer guidance and with national guidance that has been issued as well. It exists for all levels. It is based on, for the in-person and hybrid, that there will be 1 student per seat with no one sitting behind the driver. In both the in-person and the hybrid, in the in-person, there will be a need for an additional bus and a van in all likelihood, as well as additional drivers. In the hybrid model, there may be a need for an additional van. We're not so sure yet about additional buses, though both models would require all of our spares to be used. And that would include replacing bus 21, which the committee remembers is no longer inspectable. In the fully remote model, the only transportation we will likely provide is to out-of-district schools if any of those are operating in a fully remote situation. In food service, we have a food service plan for both buildings. Again, all three situations. We are perhaps feeding in rooms. We're still debating to see whether or not we can figure out a methodology for feeding in the cafeteria, but the 6-foot spacing is very difficult to achieve in our cafeterias with the tables we have. It will be a serve versus offer situation. And by that, you may be used to seeing your students come through the cafeteria and pick out the food that they want. That will no longer be able to happen. They will actually be served whatever the meal is that particular day. There will be additional staff and equipment required for both the in-person and the hybrid model. In a fully remote model, it will be a situation where meals would be picked up at the school in all likelihood. We again will probably debate the issue of whether or not we would offer meal delivery. I would say at the moment that probably will not happen. The extended day is a plan that is still in development. In looking at the Clyde Brown survey, there was a huge response for parents wanting the extended day to be restarted. So we know there is demand. But there's a lot of questions in how we are going to be able to go about doing that, not the least of which will be the spaces that will be available, staff-student ratios, how we'll achieve social distancing, the PPE that might be required, how we deal with toys, and a whole slew of things that we're still working on. That is in existence for both an in-person model as well as a hybrid model. In a fully remote model, and to some degree also with the hybrid model, as there is a day that would be fully remote, is whether or not extended day can operate if the schools are not operating. That's one question we still need to resolve. And then the other is whether or not, and this is a long-term question, this is not something that we will resolve before we open, or reopen rather, is whether or not the extended day should pursue a formal childcare license. But that would have certain obligations to it that the district may not want to proceed with. And again, that is something that is a long-term issue. And I honestly don't know who's next.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chuck Grant, the Director of Student Affairs of the Middle High School, as well as the Director of Athletics of the Middle High School. Athletics had a big day today as there were two major meetings. The COVID-19 task force set up by the MIAA met with the Board of Directors for the MIAA. And although exciting news came out of that meeting, it is important that we understand that the MIAA as an association can set policy for sports in terms of if sports are going to run. But the final say rests with the commissioner and the state government through its guidelines as to what we will actually be allowed to implement. Phase 3, step 1 has made some allowances for athletics that we've seen take place in our towns and neighboring towns as certain sports have been allowed to begin competition, as well as recreational activities and conditioning exercises have been allowed to take place, which is going well for us and for many area towns. Much of what would take place in athletics would mirror the transportation and building plans of the school. One of the unique things of athletics is that we do welcome guests in from other towns, not just opponents, coaches, and officials, but also fans. We are awaiting guidelines, not only for transportation, which may come out by Friday, if not Monday, but also guidelines for overall in terms of what sports will be allowed and what the guidelines for fans would be in accommodating opponents as visitors to your campus. My guess is that porta potties will become somewhat of a role here. Tents will also play an important role, as the question will be whether or not we will allow teams into our school. I can assure you that the Tri-Valley League will have a universal protocol, so everybody will be familiar with it when they travel to other schools and they travel to us. Non-league games would be eliminated so as to eliminate that someone coming in from outside our league not being familiar with our protocol. But all the building plans, all the transportation plans will all be followed. And once we get the guidelines, as I say, transportation should come out Friday, but further guidelines, sports specific, we hope to have come out by the end of the first week of August. So right now, the date set for sports starting is September 14th for those sports that would be allowed to compete. However, that date has not been approved by the state government, only by the state association.
Thank you. As you can see, there's been a tremendous amount of thought around all of these areas, and a lot more details also have been discussed than we are sharing tonight, just in the because of the time constraints. We're also awaiting a lot of guidance. As Mr. Wiggin mentioned, transportation guidance will be coming, as will ventilation guidance. We will be receiving a fall reopening checklist for operations, for teaching and learning, and many of the student supports, etc. We have received last Friday late the process from the Department of Education and Department of Public Health, the processes for handling positive cases in the schools and on buses, including when we should cancel or quarantine a group of children or a classroom, or the entire school might need to shut down at some point. Those clarification on those is being sought out, and we will be developing our local protocols based on those, and in consultation with our local Department of Public Health. We are still awaiting word from Department of Education on the remote learning resources that they might be providing to support families, students, and districts. In the meantime, we are also actively exploring how best to support our students and teachers, or our students who are learning from home, remotely, if we have to go fully remote, or in hybrid, and doing planning on a lot of training, and teachers are already doing a lot of training for that this summer. Facilities and operations, as we mentioned, there are a lot of details still to be determined. And transportation guidance, we received a little bit of information, but it is not the official guidance, as Mr. Wiggin mentioned. So we're still up in the air on and waiting for the Department of Ed to finalize some things. And some of the guidance is taking much longer to get to districts than we had hoped, but I think it is in the that Department of Ed is trying very hard to be very thorough, very thoughtful, and inclusive in their guidance. Next slide, please. So for our next steps, now that we have some draft ideas put together, we will be sending surveys out to get more input from families, for example, on which of the models they prefer, who is planning on attending and who is planning on staying home remotely, whether they intend on riding the bus. We will also be surveying our teachers and other staff for input on their plans and the reopening plan itself, the professional development needs, and the protocols that we are developing. We will then revise and deepen our schools' reopening plans with more detail based on the guidelines, the guidance that we receive, and our survey, the feedback from surveys. We will identify some key reopening metrics and data that we would like to use to help determine where we are as a district. And Millis, you know, we're in a fortunate place right now in terms of number of cases in Millis and how few cases we've had so far. So we will track the trajectory of those metrics and stay on top of that, and make recommendations to the school committee. The school committee will then be the governing body that approves our plan, that we will submit to the Department of Education by August 10th. And I believe that's our last slide, correct? So in conclusion, I would like to thank everybody. There is, as I said, a lot more detail that has been discussed, but this our intention tonight was to give you in broad strokes our preliminary ideas, and then to solicit feedback from families, school committee, and teaching and other staff members.
Great. Nancy, first I want to just say thank you very much to you and everyone here. It's clear that you have all put a lot of work into this, and we can tell. So thank you for all of that. So for everybody that's listening to, I think it's good just so the high level kind of summarize. We have 3 plans that we need to submit, and correct me if I get something wrong at any time. And the deadline's August 10th. The 3 plans are for fully all in, and in our case, our fully all in 6 foot. As of now, you're comfortable with everyone through 8th grade, and you're working on high school. See if that's feasible. Our hybrid model kind of talks about that phased in approach, where our hybrid model right now is cohort A and B, where Monday, Tuesday you would go to school, and then cohort B would be Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being a remote day. And then high needs kids could be in school on Wednesday morning. And then fully remote is what it is, right? Fully remote. So did I get that correct? Okay, great. Just wanted to kind of high level summarize what for everyone that's listening, what our plans look like as of now. Knowing that you guys are still working on the fine details and tweaking everything, and we hope that eventually our full all-in plan will include the high school also. I know that we have a lot of questions on YouTube, but I first wanted to open it up to the school committee. Do you all have any clarifications or questions that you wanted to bring up?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Conroy.
Yeah, I have a few, so I'll just kind of go through, try and put them by section. First is on the PPE that we're providing staff. Can we get a description of exactly what that is? Is it the mask, that kind of the disposable mask that we see? Is it the face shields, a combination, something completely different? What specifically do we have planned and ordered?
Yeah, Mr. Wiggin, why don't you take that?
I'll start. I think it's really all of the above. We have a combination of disposable masks and N95 masks, and the application of who would use disposables and who would use N95s depends on the user and the situation. There are also face shields that have been ordered. There are gowns that have been ordered. There are gloves that have been ordered. And I'll be honest with you, there's a number of things that fall under the classification of PPE based on the DESE guidelines. And we have followed those guidelines and really actually exceeded them. I'm trying to think if they're the little booties. I'm not sure about that. I can't honestly remember, but we have placed orders for virtually every form of PPE.
Good. One of the reasons that I ask, I actually looked this up because I asked people I know at a Boston hospital what clinic staff are wearing, just because they're in seeing patients every day. And, basically they're wearing they get provided one of the disposable masks per day. And so just kind of as a frame of reference as to what people are using in the hospital and how we're comparing, and based on what you're saying, we're at or exceeding what kind of are being provided in healthcare settings as well, which I think is important for staff and families to know.
Yes.
Question on space. And I don't know, John, if you would know this off the top of your head. Do we know square footage of individual classrooms or just a ballpark, and how fitting, and if they have capacity. So, right now, office buildings, churches, and retail stores are basically asked to keep capacity at 50%, or 10 people for every 1,000 square feet. So just curious how our 6 feet distance kind of puts that into scale in terms of whether the 6 feet distance in our classrooms that we can accommodate all in, how does that measure up to what private entities are being held to? And we may not have that tonight, but maybe at a follow-up or a follow-up, we can get kind of, again, to compare what classrooms will look like compared to what people are seeing elsewhere or experiencing.
So, Mark, we do have square footages of the rooms. Rooms are different, especially when you start bringing in science rooms and lab, where you have the lab tables and the different configurations in there. But we can talk offline if you wanted to get you numbers for the next time of whatever you're looking for. But we do have the general measurements for each room, both at Clyde Brown and the high school, middle school.
Great. Nancy, a question on the timing of the phases. You had mentioned phase 1 starting August 27th and being about a week. Just trying to kind of get a little bit of a gauge. So then phase 2 would be, I guess that's where I start to get a little confused. If August 27th for a week, so would phase 2 be like the September 8th and 9th, the Tuesday and Wednesday after Labor Day? And then instruction started on the 10th, or are we talking instruction starting on the 14th?
So as you know, we're starting discussions with the Teachers Association around the calendar. We had students not attending school until after Labor Day, and that might be, let's see. Again, the details to be ironed out, but students would not begin classes before Labor Day, and we'd have a couple of days of orientation for families and students. So the goal usually is, we usually take the Friday before Labor Day as a non-teaching day, non-working day for teachers. And that would leave us 4 days of training that week. So it could, if we require and wish to have more training for teachers, it could shift a little bit, but we're in dialogue about that right now.
Okay. All right. I think that's just important for people to know that we're definitely not going to see instruction before, at least after Labor Day.
Correct.
The only other question on with the bringing in special education and students on IEPs, do we have an idea of how that impacts how many kids we can bring in a hybrid setting? Does that alter kind of the idea of 50%, 50%?
I can answer that, Mr. Conroy. Our student population's so small in the overall that we've created a list now of the students that we would consider essential to be in full-time and those that we would like to consider. So there's a flexible group there. We will look at students who didn't engage remotely as well, and we'll work with leadership of the school to identify which cohorts they could be in that wouldn't tip the balance or prevent anyone else from being there. So we believe with the initial look that this is entirely possible, and we would work with families too for their preference. So some have asked, And some have said they'd just rather be in the cohort. But we don't expect that impact to tip the balance, because the students who we know would be, one of the reasons is because the students that we know who we would want to have in full time are students who are in a substantially separate setting or in a program. And that's consistent with Department of Education. They have their own setting, they have their own cohort, and the cohort can 6 foot distance. Is that clear? Is that,
Yep.
does that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's helpful. Sorry, just an add on to that. I know it mentioned specifically the IEP plans. Are 504 plans included in that
504
criteria?
plans, 504 plans do follow a totally different protocol.
Okay.
But I know that folks are already putting together plans on how to meet for 504s as well. And we'll work with them to share some of the protocols we've done remotely if that's the way that folks want to do it.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? School committee?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Briggs.
I was just wondering the plan to divide the students up. Is it going to be alphabetically? Is it going to be by grade? How are you going to determine who goes in on Monday and Tuesday and who comes in on Thursday and Friday?
That is still to be determined. We know it's important to have families in the same cohort. And so we have not gotten to the level of planning of determining whether it's A through L in one cohort and then M through Z in the other cohort. And if we could, ideally, we could accommodate requests due to working schedules, et cetera, because one of the, we took a look at the other hybrid plans, like a week A, week B. And I think that we all decided it has detriments. It's a long time for kids to be out of school and away from school. So we preferred a plan where we see them every week. And also, I think it might be harder for childcare purposes. And then some districts have gone with a 6-day rotation. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 week, Tuesday, Thursday, Monday. It just, a 6-day rotation, I think, wreaks havoc on childcare and family planning. So we really liked the 2-day-a-week model for the consistency and the coherence of having 2 consecutive days. And hopefully that's also a little more doable for families.
Okay, great. A follow-up question to that is, do we have a plan in place or a specific number of cases that would potentially make us go all remote? Is there a threshold that you're thinking about? And then what would that be to potentially come back into the class? In the beginning, you had mentioned that the phase 4 would be potentially at the end of September, people would come back into the building. And so I didn't know if there was a specific number of no cases or what that looks like to know, to alert families that we're going to be moving into this phase or into this model, because I think that one of the things about the spring was it was just abrupt. We just sort of left, and just to give people some time to kind of plan, okay, we're going to be remote.
We're expecting those kinds of clarifications to come from the state level of what is a threshold, what is a safe or a threshold that once it's reached, then we determine, and in consultation with our local DPH as well, that there might be some cohorts, small cohorts, a classroom that gets quarantined versus the entire school. So that guidance is coming to us, and so it won't be us. We will adhere basically to the recommendations that are given to us, and then it is a little bit of a case-by-case situation that we would confer with our local Department of Public Health on.
Okay, great. And then I have a question. I guess I'm thinking that Miss Danahy would be able the one to answer us. And I didn't know if you had, or if we as a school had a recommendation for parents as the type of PPE they should be sending their kids to school with. Will any old handmade mask work? Is it like, what should parents be sort of preparing to get to send their kids to school in?
Just muting myself, sorry. We are obviously requesting the parents to supply masks for the children. It would be face masks. There'll be some guidance coming out. What we don't have yet is all the communication that we're going to be giving the parents. And then we will obviously have extras at school for when things obviously happen to the masks. They will be, the kids will be sneezing in them, etc. So, but there will be definite guidance going out to the parents as to what we hope and expect them to provide.
Okay, I'm just thinking like if we don't have the final plan until August 10th, that's only a couple of weeks that like 1,000 parents in our district are going to be scrambling to get, and then everything will be sold out, right? Because the entire country is going back to school. So I didn't know if we had any way to get that information to parents beforehand, you know?
I will definitely work on it.
Thank you.
Steve or Denise, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just have a couple. So I remember I think it might have been the last meeting or maybe 2 meetings ago, there was some talk about some of the learnings about the remote learning aspect of the spring. So I didn't know if you might be able to share some thoughts on ideas for remote learning or how that might be different from what we saw in the spring. Because I know that there were surveys that were done and there was feedback from the community. And there was some really great information that you would share with the committee a couple of weeks ago. So if the appropriate folks wouldn't mind spending a couple of minutes just talking about what remote learning might look like if we had to go to that model, I think that might be helpful.
I think our principals can speak very well to that. Who wants to chime in first?
No one.
Bob, either one.
Bob raised his hand.
Okay, Bob.
Oh, I didn't see Maureen.
Maureen got off mute first. Maureen got off mute first.
I'm on.
Yeah, you're already muted.
So I'll speak in general terms to it. We got a lot of feedback from parents and students and teachers in terms of how we rolled out remote learning and how we operated in the spring. As Joan mentioned and Jen mentioned, we've already planned PD for teachers so that all teachers are sort of starting with a solid base of blended learning, best practices for remote learning. I'll speak just to the middle school. Our discussions have been around how can we structure it a little bit more? How can we make it a little more rigorous and more like school, students be more accountable, attendance taken, grading happening. We are trying, we're in preliminary stages of trying to create a schedule that would seamlessly shift from in-person to hybrid to remote. So no matter what plan or model we're in at a particular day or week, students would be following the same sort of schedule, trying to simplify and streamline, make the transitions as, fewer than normal in the middle school. We're trying to minimize student interactions. We're trying to minimize how many students, teachers come into contact during a particular school day. Being sensitive to what might be going on in people's homes and, a little bit of flexibility built in too, because we know things are going to happen and come up that we'll need to be flexible and adjust and shift, maybe on a dime again. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question? Is there going to be, and I understand the flexibility piece of it, but is there going to be more of a scheduled day for them where they have to like zoom into a social studies class and their teacher they'll listen to a lecture and have a discussion, that type of thing? It'll be a little more structured.
We're hoping to come up with something that if they're in school, they have a schedule. If they're out of school, it's the same schedule.
Perfect.
Fairly close. Again, with a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning activities, live lessons. Jen talked about, we're working out ways for teachers to record lessons that students can watch over and over, or if they happen to miss something. So yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah, I would also say that, our surveys mirrored the surveys from the middle school with both parents and students. We had some kids say, I didn't work as hard at remote because I wasn't getting graded. And I know I should love learning, but sometimes grades motivate me. So, there will be more traditional grading, things like attendance, and as Maureen mentioned, the live meetings, and there might be times when kids who are on remote learning are viewing the board of a class that's in session. And like the middle school, we're looking at having the same schedule every day, in the hybrid model. We're looking at each period, the 7 periods occurring each day, and no rotation, so the kids will know, it'll be pretty standard. I have an 8 o'clock math class every day, whether I'm remote or whether I'm in person live. And I think, so there'll be more accountability in the system. And also, I think, Jen and Joan have done an awful lot with the PD, and Jen's done some great work with the G Suite resources and other resources for teachers. And I know teachers are looking at that, and the modern classroom. So like you said, Denise, when this thing started, it was all of a sudden we're not going back to school. Now we've had time to plan. And the input from parents and kids was very helpful, and also the teachers. And, we were aware that, it wasn't a perfect situation in March. It was an emergency situation. So now we've had a little more time to prepare.
Great. Thank you, guys. Super helpful. Yeah, go ahead. For Clyde Brown.
Hi, thank you. As the middle school and high school, we do plan to follow a very similar schedule with a little bit of difference on the fully remote portion. Our specials, art, music, gym, media are scattered throughout the week. So for parents, we would want to align that so that possibly by grade, it would be grade 1 having their specialist time for art, music, gym at a specific time, so that parents aren't going back and forth. It's Monday, it's 10 o'clock Monday, and then 2 o'clock Tuesday, and 11 o'clock Thursday. So we're going to try to streamline that a little bit more for parents, but provide the same structure that they have within the classroom. And the feedback from parents was that FaceTime and contact with the teacher is extremely important. And through the remote, the modern classroom, we're working on ways that we can increase that time, face-to-face time with students and teachers.
Great. Really, really helpful, everybody. Thank you. I have one other one, if I could, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
So with the hybrid model, or even in a full in with some number of students that would be remote. So let's say we're all back in at some point, and then there's some subset of students that are working remotely. Can you just share some thoughts on access to students? So for the students that are at home while the classroom teaching is happening, are they live streaming into the classroom, or how do they get their teacher time, if you will, for lack of a better term, I guess, if that teacher is actively teaching all of the days of the week except for one? And I don't need details, but like just a high level of some initial thoughts would be great.
I think it generally depends on the developmental level. So we've talked about it, and at the it's a little bit different at the elementary than at the middle than at the high school, but there would be a lot more of on-screen time with the teacher, including the students at home maybe attending the class via the camera being on the teacher. And if the teacher, unfortunately for in all this, it is a little more traditional style of teaching than we like to have in Millis, where students are very engaged in project-based learning, et cetera. But there will be an element, and teachers are pretty creative about, okay, this portion of it would be the camera's on me. I have my half of students in the room with me. The other half are attending from home. That might not be every single part of the day. And I don't know if the principals would like to add to that a little bit. Maureen?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Denise. That's something that we're talking a lot about, how to facilitate and make sure that students at home, you know, have the same level of engagement as students who are in person that particular day. I think we can go a couple of different ways with it. We haven't quite landed on where we're going to go, but there's a model where some designated staff members would be, you know, in charge of working with students who are fully remote, whether it's just a small cohort of students while others most everybody else is in school, or whether we're hybrid. Also, you know, video recording, as Nancy said, we're looking into recording sort of portions of lessons that teachers are presenting so that students then can work a little bit independently and with check-ins. We're also just talking about how we arrange those cohorts, and could it possibly be, in the middle school anyway, a cohort is a class that happens to be at home that day, so it's in the teacher's schedule so that teacher's available to teach that class remotely. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's a lot of logistics to puzzle pieces to put together, but there's a few different ways we can attack that question. And
great, that's really helpful, really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, I think you said you were good. Do you have anything else? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Catalano.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Catalano. Can you hear me? Can you not hear me?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Catalano.
I have two questions.
Go ahead.
Can someone explain the decision, or I'm assuming it's from guidance, not to have students in K and 1 wear masks? And if they're not wearing masks, is the classroom any different, or is it just like all the other classrooms in Clyde Brown where they're socially distant? I was just wondering if the lack of mask wearing has any impact on what those classrooms actually look like.
I'll start with that. The Department of Ed has said that masks are required of all students from grade 2 and up. Our preference and our goal is that all students will wear masks. There might be students with special needs with behavioral considerations for that, but the goal will be that 100% of our students wear masks. Of course, preschool, kindergarten students, we will be testing that out, seeing how that works, and adjusting as we go. But that's why it was important, especially in the younger grades, to make sure we had the 6 feet of distancing. Would anybody else like to add to that? Tana? Yeah.
Yes, but the guidelines say that as long as we're 6 feet apart, we can eat. So we've made sure that every classroom is at least 6 feet apart, so that we're following the guidelines for those younger students throughout the building. But with the guidance that it is safe to take your mask off and eat, if you're 6 feet apart, then as long as we can maintain that 6 feet distance, there should be a level of safety there.
Okay, that makes sense. And I do have one more question. Even not every day is going to be 100 degrees, but is there any thought of utilizing some of the nice weather we have in September into early October, and maybe using some of Mr. Grant's locker rooms outside in tents to do some outdoor classroom work, or we don't have to be under a tent? And I know you don't have a long stretch of time, but is that being thought of in the process of how to utilize outdoor space?
Yes, actually, absolutely. Clyde Brown has a number of very nice outdoor learning areas. And yes, the tents would help us provide shade in the heat. And maybe if it's light rain or something, kids could still go out and access those areas. And we're looking at, for the courtyard in the middle high school, perhaps a large tent. We do have another area under a tree, etc. And we're exploring other ideas about outdoor learning, but it is absolutely the outdoors is a wonderful place for real world learning to take place in many ways, and our teachers are creative about integrating that. And then second of all, it is just healthier air and wonderful to be outside if we can be. So a lot of discussion around that.
Thank you. I'm all set, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we have quite a few questions on YouTube that have come through. I think some of them have been answered, but I'll read them anyway. Even if I think we've answered them, we can just say that we've answered it. So the first one is, will there be testing protocol implemented for students and staff? So I'm assuming that's COVID testing. So is there any plan for COVID testing for students and staff?
There will be screening, daily screening. Families and staff will need to run through the protocol of checking themselves for symptoms, or families checking their children, and we will produce the information that will come from our health offices on that. In terms of testing, the testing protocols come to us from the state and the Department of Education as to when we would require testing.
Okay. The next one I believe we've answered, but I'll just read it. Please describe the teacher contact that students will receive when their cohort is working remotely, but I believe we've answered that one. The next one, teachers need to be available more often. It would take hours, even days, for a response. So I think, again, we've answered about teachers being available. Unless Nancy, or if anyone has anything that they wanted to add about teacher hours, maybe. I don't know if it's, parent-teacher conferences or what, any additional hours or times that teachers would be available.
I think, Sue Ann mentioned the concept of office hours. So there will be, teachers, we understand that a really important piece of this is greater communication between home and school and how it's working for your child at home. And so that will be a priority, something that when we developed our, in a document called, I think, empowering remote, hybrid and remote learning, we emphasize the importance of communication and good partnerships so that, yes, there will be office hours and greater communication with families.
Great. Another question is, will there be a change to the length of the school day to create time for teachers to meet with those students who are working remotely?
So there are some legislative things in place that we are required to do and have 180 days and 900 hours, 990 hours at the secondary level, or I might have switched that, but the Department of Ed is looking at some of that, but the indication is that we are not going to, the Department of Ed will have to approve our plan, and they are not looking at shortening the time on learning that will be required of students.
Okay. The next is about ventilation. So a parent is asking what came of the assessment of the ventilation system. So I'm assuming this is the middle high school, as Clyde Brown is brand new.
I'm assuming so. The formal report is due to us next week. I know there's a number of things that the consultant, recommended, and John and I are investigating that can be done. But I think, the full report and full analysis of that is ongoing right now. And we are awaiting recommendations from the state. This is one of the other areas we're awaiting recommendations from the state as far as, what they're looking for the airflow recommendations.
Great, thanks, Terry. The next one is there a sense of the hybrid model that Millis has chosen to be the same as surrounding districts? So Nancy, I think that the questions around our hybrid, for families to plan, or if you're, if you're teaching in other districts, I'm assuming.
So I meet with the area superintendents in the Tri-Valley or within our ACCEPT collaborative or tech collaborative every week, and sometimes we meet twice a week to see if we can have coherence around much of this. There is, what we're working on is some ideas to put in place that will try to standardize some things. There is not 100% agreement, in some districts, that because we've all been talking with our teachers and getting input from parents, I think people are wanting to go with what they believe is their best model. But we're also floating some ideas up to the Department of Education of how to maybe have a mutual aid agreement among districts to accommodate some childcare issues. So we're talking about it at length.
Great. The next one is around food service. So would students bringing in lunch use disposable containers or bags? And similar question regarding water bottles. So are we requiring disposable containers?
I would say the short answer is yes. And the thing I would like to stress is that particularly with the lunches, I know when I was a boy, sometimes I'd get a bag lunch and my mother would put a piece of silverware in there. That is something that we couldn't have happen. We need it to be completely disposable. So plastic fork, I'm sorry, we're going to be destroying the environment a little bit, but it needs to be completely disposable. Same for the drinks. They need to be in a bottle, like a disposable water container that we can trash.
There's bamboo forks and knives, so it doesn't have to.
Bamboo is okay. As long as we can put it into a trash barrel, it will be okay.
Perfect.
We're going in the landfill.
Next one is about hybrid. I think we've answered this. They're wanting what would the hybrid model look like 1 week on, 1 week off. It's cohort A and B is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday remote, Thursday, Friday is cohort B. The next one, how are you ensuring kids are learning at grade level?
I'll start and then Joan Lynn can chime in. The Department of Ed is going to be providing us with even more formative assessment tools, and we already have several in place, and teachers will be creating their own formative assessments to see where kids are. One of the philosophical underpinnings of our approach in Millis is a personalized learning approach in which we don't assume just because you're in second grade that you are at an X spot in all of your subjects. And so we're very adept, our teachers are very adept at assessing where kids are in all the subject areas and even the meta skills and executive functioning, and then we adjust. That's what we believe we need to do, is meet kids where they are and take them as far as we can. So, and the Department of Ed has indicated that it hopes to provide us with another very good commercial tool to software program that will help with that even more so.
Great.
Did you want to add? Yeah.
I think the other piece is that before we left school in June, all of our teachers participated in an activity where they looked at their power standards for the year, and they actually made some notations as to, was it something that was taught prior to March 13th? Was it something that was taught while we were remote? Was it something that we had evidence that the students understood and could demonstrate competency, or was it something that for whatever reason they didn't get to? So one of the pieces we're looking at as part of our PD schedule for when we do come back, end of August, beginning of September, is to have some overlap between the teachers who had the students last year and then their rising teacher who they're going to be with, so that there can be some conversation about what those standards were, what they did, how they did it, and what evidence we have to support the decision. I think one of the other pieces that we learned some information about was that states or cities that had catastrophes in the past. You look back on Katrina in New Orleans, and one of the things, they closed their schools for months because they just wasn't capable of housing school. And one of the research that kind of came out of it was that you kind of have to continue to go on. Students did better when you continued on and you filled in the gaps where they had them, as opposed to assuming that they were behind in any way or that they weren't making their progress. So for us to look at where are they, as Nancy just said, where are they as they come in and where do we go from there, is the conversation that all teachers at all grade levels will be having, so that we can best meet individual needs, grade level needs, and maybe department needs, depending upon where we are with those things.
Okay. The next one is, I think we answered this one. How will remote be different this time around? So I think we've answered that one. The next question, what is the school's decision tree between remote and hybrid? Is it, I think there's a little bit more to this, but I think what they're getting at is, are we only looking at, can we meet the 6-foot guideline, or are we taking into account other risk factors for COVID?
I think we'll definitely be looking at the whole picture, and that'll be a discussion with school committee and developing some metrics, and it will not just be one guideline. The Department of Ed, and I think this is very important, this 3 to 6 foot guideline that the Department of Ed landed on is in conjunction with a lot of other things. It's one strategy among many, and the mask wearing is a very important component, one of the most important. The hand sanitizing and hand washing frequently, disinfecting surfaces frequently, cohorting, so there's contact with fewer other children during the day, and probably a couple of other things that I've forgotten, but it's the entirety of those strategies that will be effective, not just one alone.
Okay, can you explain how and at what frequency you will screen students and staff for COVID-19 symptoms? I think we talked about that. So every day, basically, they have to do a self-check or a self-evaluation.
Self-check, yeah.
Yeah. For PPE, are we going by DESE protocol? I think the concern is that they feel, or they have some experience that the recommendation was not enough.
Well,
they went through more. They went through it faster.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
Just briefly, a couple of things. First, one of the silver linings to this pandemic, if there is one, is that the state departments are playing nice and talking to each other. So when we talk about DESE guidelines, those were developed in working with the Department of Public Health. So it's not like the education department developed them in a vacuum. So I'd like to point that out. The second is we started ordering PPE based on CDC guidelines before the guidance came out. So right now we actually have either on order or in our hands PPE that is in excess of those initial guidelines. The third thing that I would point out is we have no illusions that we have PPE for the entire year. There's going to be a burn rate. We're going to find out what our particular burn rate is. And as that develops, we will obviously adjust and order accordingly.
Perfect, thank you. This is more of just a request, and I believe that this no problem. Can we, they're asking us to share the info of the school distancing versus the private entity distancing requirement. So 10 people per 1,000 square feet, and how do we compare? So I think John said that he was going to look into that, so we should have that shortly. Swan, this one's for you. How do we know if we're on the list? I believe this applies to the discussion around students who are required to be in versus flexible cohorts.
Right. So the list was actually the list of all students we have in the district. So if a student's on an IEP, they're on the list, and we're reviewing that list. From it, we know the students who are in a program are the ones that would come in fully. The rest of them will be in conversations with families about whether or not they'll be in A cohort, B cohort, and maybe even in some cases both.
Okay, great, thank you. This question from a parent asking if the hybrid is flexible, and I believe this is, and I think you talked about this, Nancy, if there's any flexibility on what cohort your children are in.
Yeah, and we have not determined that specificity yet.
Perfect. So that's part of the details that we're working on. Sorry, I know I'm just trying to read through these questions. So for the middle and high school, will the kids remain in one classroom with one class/cohort throughout the day, or they move throughout different classes?
Maureen, would you like to answer for the middle school?
Sure. Again, we're in preliminary discussions, but what we're looking at right now is to create cohorts of less than 25 students that would stay together at least 85% of the day, if not 100% of the day. There's some discussion about unified arts and whether or not to perhaps mix just two cohorts together for that. So, those are things we're still working out, but certainly with the goal of trying to keep kids from interacting with fewer numbers of students during the day.
And at the high school level, because of the nature of our schedule and the courses the kids take, we're not looking at cohorting in, the way you'd look at it at an elementary school where there's 25 kids in one room that stay together all day. If we're in 100% live in person, we're looking at running a schedule that has fewer periods in the day, so there's less movement among students. In the hybrid model, we're looking at running the 7 periods. However, the students in those individual classes, there'd be fewer of them, they'd be spaced further apart. And so, that's how we're approaching it at the high school level.
Madam Chair, can I just interject a question? So are you thinking about having like one-way hallways or a specific route that kids would potentially go if they're moving through classrooms?
We're looking at things like that, and also, maybe staggered times for different classes, and creating more time in between classes, so that could also maybe include a mask break, kids going outside, taking off their masks in a supervised manner. So, we haven't landed on one thing yet, but we're looking at all those things and certainly taking that into consideration, because, the high school kids, they have more interaction with each other. And, hopefully we'll have sports in the fall, so your cohort would also be the members of your team. Or, we have kids that have to student population works at Roach Brothers. And so, you know, that's a cohort as well. So it's a real challenge that we're trying to just reduce the movement and reduce the chance of contact.
Okay, the questions keep coming, so I'm going to keep going down. This one, and it's, why can't you run regular schedule but do it remotely? I mean, I'd say we have a full remote plan. We hope to, but our goal is to safely return as many students as possible to the school and eventually get back to having kids in the school. I don't know if Nancy, if you wanted to add anything to that, or seems like a
no, I think, well, and I think at the middle school especially, and maybe the elementary as well, that the plan for in-person and hybrid and remote, we're trying to make those as the same as possible so that it's the same schedule, whether you're in school or you're remote. I think the challenge is at the high school. That's a little harder.
The next one I think is more, I don't know if it's more of a question or it can't, well, I guess it is. Can teachers teach live to children in the class at the same time in a video? And I think we talked about that you know, everyone's looking into that, where we have some remote kids that you know, remote directly into the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be an assistant to facilitate questions coming in for the viewing from the live video? I think I believe you answered that one too, where you were looking into having assistants or
yes, it's one of the things we've talked about, learning facilitators.
Great. John, I think this one's for you. For Clyde Brown, is a ventilation capable of turning over the air throughout the day and removing particles?
John,
yeah.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Will cohort A and B be taught in the same live video sessions on Wednesdays?
I think the details are being worked out, but I think yes. I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
Principals, correct me if I'm wrong there.
I think it might, at least at the high school level, it might depend on the individual class. It might be a time that, you know, they're working on a project where there might be a live check-in, which would be both cohorts A and B, but it might be after that check-in, then they go off and work on some remote activity. I think it depends on the class and the assignment. So, you know, I don't know if that would be something that would happen every single class, every single Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Tana?
We're thinking that the morning would start with a live meeting of the whole classroom and use that time to break out into some small groups for some more individualized supports for students, so that we would start the morning together. We'd break off into groups, work on some strategies, and then possibly come back together before the end of the day with the closing.
Okay. So I'm just sort of reading through all these, and I think we're getting into a lot of detailed questions, and to be fair to all of you, I know that you guys aren't yet into the details, the nitty-gritty details. So I'm wondering if we should just copy all of these questions and just make sure that in the next presentation that we've addressed them all, just to give you guys a chance to look at them, because I'm seeing now that the questions are getting more detailed and more detailed. And again, just to be fair, I know that we're not quite there yet with those small little details in the planning, and perhaps we can just, or I'm just opening up, or you know, I think it's better time spent kind of copying them down, just for you, for anyone that I haven't gotten to your question, to know that the next presentation that we'll make sure that all of these questions are addressed. But to be fair to the admin team here, they haven't quite gotten there in that planning. So Nancy, unless you have another thought, I think that might be the best thing to do.
Yeah, and we're planning on putting together an FAQ. So we can group the questions into and try to answer them in a document as well that we make available.
Right.
So I would, in our survey, we will encourage people to ask questions, or they can email them to us, and we will do our best to group those into similar categories of questions and get a written document out to everyone.
Yes, and I will say that there was some question. The school committee does plan on, we are going to meet in person in the next coming weeks at the school. So we will be going back to some live in-person meetings prior to school starting. I think it's just only the right thing to do, as we're asking parents and students to come back into the building, that we also do the same thing. So we will be moving back to live in-person meetings in the next coming weeks. Okay. I think that's it for the back to school portion. So again, I want to, on behalf of the school committee, I just want to thank everyone here again for all of the work that you guys have put into this so far. We can, it certainly shows that you guys have been working on this tirelessly, I assume, and again, thank you. So I think, you're all welcome to hang out with the school committee as we go through the rest, but if you have something else to do, we completely understand, because we are going to move on to a consideration to approve temporary business office help. Bye, everyone. Have a good night. We'll give everyone a second before we move on.
And we're almost at a regular school committee meeting. We only need 8 more people to drop off, and they're going as we speak. Jody, is there anyone signed in for open session?
All the exciting stuff. Okay, Terry, do you want to, is this from you?
Yeah. This is for me.
Okay.
Well, obviously I've been working on lots of things, between a couple of things related to COVID-19, which I'm still working on, obviously, as we all are, and you just saw a representation of that, as well as the Munis transition and just stuff. And an opportunity presented itself for us to get some very expert help in the business office on a temporary basis. Lisa Morin, who's the town accountant, no longer works on Fridays for the town. So she is available to us to potentially work and I estimated it for about 10 weeks to help out. She would be not only a help to me, but a help to my staff, not only in the transition to Munis, but in a number of different issues, balancing accounts, helping us learn how to manipulate the new Munis software. There are some things that I do that she would have expertise in similar things that she could assist with. And I think generally it would be a sound investment to help get us hopefully back on track, and so that we don't feel quite as behind as we all do right now. It's relatively short money for that period of time, about $3,200, if I recall. I'm not looking at the memo, but that's what my memory tells me. Again, I have a great working relationship with Lisa, and she's excellent at what she does. So I would have no problem working with her. I know in the past there's been town school issues, but I think that's with predecessors, and I think that's certainly more with, let's just call it, her former mentor.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Caruana.
Mr. Wiggins, I suspect I'm asking 2 questions, I should say. Is the town administrator aware of this? And
yes.
Is he okay with this?
Yes.
And then 2, I don't think there is any issues, but is there any sort of legal issues or ramifications where someone is on furlough and another department is hiring them? I just want to make sure. I couldn't
there's
imagine there would be anything, but I would at least want to ask that publicly and make sure there are no problems. More importantly, the administrator knows.
Right. It's a good question, and no, there are not.
Okay. Madam Chair,
Mr. Catalano,
if no one else has any questions, I'd be willing to make a motion.
I'm ready for a motion.
Okay. Madam Chair, I make a motion to authorize the business manager to hire part-time summer help, a business office position in the amount not to exceed $3,200.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Steve's motion is for part-time summer help, and 8 weeks seems to, I mean, what if it goes into September? Does it have to be like, you know what I mean? Like summer help?
Just say temporary help. You don't have to put summer in there.
That was
Just
the
say
intent
temporary.
of my motion. And I also did not specifically list the person in case something happens and you needed to find someone else temporary. Obviously that is your intent. You've publicly stated it, but I didn't want to get you caught up in something and now we're 3 weeks later and you can't hire someone.
No, thank you.
Temporary help not to exceed 3,200.
You got it.
Who second, please?
Denise did.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay, we're going to move to consideration to approve the Unit C paraprofessionals contract.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I am going to recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay, you've been recused. So we have the contract here. I think we've all looked at it, and Nancy, this is the final step.
Correct. This is the open meeting portion of everything that was discussed and approved previously in executive session.
Does somebody want to make a motion?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Gibbons.
I make a motion to accept the, sorry, hold on. I'm just looking at the, what do I call it? MOA? Or is it, what is it? Sorry, I'm looking for it.
Unit C contract.
Unit C CBA.
Yeah. I make a motion to approve the Millis Teachers Association Unit C contract as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Catalano.
In addition to a lot of language issues and very important kind of contractual issues that were addressed, I think what we've done in the past is give a high level of the financial impact. And there's financial impact in a couple different places, but more importantly, there's a COLA across 3 years of 2, 2, and 2. So there are some smaller financial impacts, but that is the majority impact would be a 2, 2, 2 raise for FY 20, 21, and 22.
Great. Anything else in here that we should point out, or just the financial piece?
That's usually what we have done.
Okay.
And it's a public document, but that's what the high level on the financial impact.
Perfect. So I believe we have a motion already on the table. It's been seconded. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So Jody, everyone is in favor. Mark is recused himself for this.
Denise motioned and Robin second, right?
Correct.
I went away from the screen. Okay, good.
All
Madam
right.
Chair.
Motion carries. Miss Graham.
Hello.
Hello.
I just wanted to, on behalf of Unit C, thank the school committee and admin. It was, it wasn't easy to do this through Zoom and online and with remote learning and everything, but Our group is, happy to have this completed, and I think the process went well overall. And so we just wanted to thank the school committee for the time and considerations and making this all work out. So thank you.
Thank you too. Thanks for all your hard work. All right, motion carries. It has been approved. Okay, what else do we have? Fall reopening plan, we're done. School committee questions, we're done. Chairman's report, superintendent evaluation. So this is just the public version. Nancy, can you remind me what we've done in the past for this?
Actually, Madam Chair, we have not done much around this other than in the public session is just announcing that you've evaluated the superintendent and you could say what the ratings are in each of the categories and then an overall rating.
Sure. So we have gone through the performance evaluation for this past year for Nancy. And so there is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry, it's very unprofessional, but I'm like counting. 5, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 sections of it. So I'll go over first. Section 1 is instructional leadership. There's 1 of 4 ratings that you can get: unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. In the first category, Nancy, we gave you an exemplary rating for instructional leadership. For management and operations, we've given you a proficient rating. Same for family and community engagement. We gave you a proficient rating. Professional culture, it is a proficient rating. And then that gives you to overall rating as a proficient. And then just the last, the comment again that we put on here is that the school committee would like to thank you for your years of dedication to the Millis School District, and we wish you well in your next chapter. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's all we had. Let me just go back to the agenda.
Madam Chair?
Miss Gibbons.
I can't remember. Did we do the 7:14 meeting minutes? Did we approve those?
Yeah, at the very beginning. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, I got that done at the beginning. Any older new business? And I know you guys skipped your ESBC meeting to do this today, so I don't expect to have an update for that. So Nancy, for next week's meeting, what should we be prepared for? Or do you think you're going to have just some further detail on the 3 different plans, or what do we think?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To be honest, I think 1 week will be a very short time frame to turn around. What we had hoped was to get out this preliminary draft plan along with a parent survey and the teacher survey, and then be able to provide more detail in writing to our plan and take into consideration school committee feedback as well as the feedback we receive from the stakeholders, teachers and families. So I think that would be hard to do by the 28th.
I don't disagree. How about we push it 1 week to the 4th, which still gives us a few days before it's due to the state, being August 10th. Is that better for you?
That would be, I think it would result in a much better and more comprehensive plan, being able to go to school committee on the 4th with still some time to refine it before we submit on the 10th.
Okay. So in that time, and just to recap, your plan is to put out another parent survey based off some of the feedback that we've gotten, and we're going to copy down all of those questions. Dave, if you can make a copy of all those questions that came over through the chat, and we can make sure that they're all addressed in the final presentation or in the FAQ, however you want to do it. Just so any parent that did have a question that I didn't read, we make sure that it gets addressed.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Conroy.
Nancy, would it be, well, I think it might be helpful when we send the survey. So, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but the two kind of big takeaways I took from the discussion in terms of planning were starting after student instruction starting after Labor Day. And right now, absent the state telling us and mandating us to do something different, we'd be starting in a hybrid model, which can change. But that's, and more specifically, that our whether we start in hybrid or not, hybrid is going to be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
So that we just kind of, those two key pieces. I know technically we're not supposed to say what we are supposed to do.
Madam, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You good? I was actually going to suggest that I think if you give them something a little more concrete, I think people will come back with some specific questions, because if you don't, and it's just another general survey, they're going to ask, is it hybrid? Is it in class? So move forward with the full stipulation that the final say has, the final regulations or guidance has not come out of DESE yet, and that everything is subject to change based on the state final guidelines. But I think giving an extra week to kind of ask some very specific questions, take the ones from the chat, I think that's helpful for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. And then what we had planned on doing after then school committee approves the formal plan that we'll be submitting to the Department of Ed, we would then do a third survey with a commitment. And the commitment would be that knowing, given the plan as it stands, my child will be attending school, or my child will be staying home and doing remote. And that will enable us to finalize busing and all kinds of details. But I think that around the 10th would be the appropriate time to ask parents to make that commitment. But yes, we'll get them in our second survey, the one we're sending out soon, give them the basic outline of what we've provided tonight.
Perfect.
Madam Chair.
Does that sound good? Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Catalano.
I just want to echo what you said earlier, that Nancy, you guys did a lot of work under a short period of time with things changing. It's clear that you worked hard on this, and I think it's helpful. It's not complete, but I think that is a helpful first step for the parents, the staff, everyone involved. So I know it's not 100% there, but you guys did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. And more details will be coming.
But it was good, even though all the details weren't finalized, to be able to answer, to have a question to say, here are the things that we're exploring, and these are the scenarios that we're playing out. We're just not there yet.
Right.
Was helpful, very helpful, and I think hopefully the public appreciated the level of work, especially in a pretty crunch time and changing dynamics.
Yeah, I think it definitely was
enough about the team. It's just an amazing team. Robin, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just saying, I think that having some inkling of what the plan is just a little weight lifted off of some parents' shoulders to be like, okay, this is what I can sort of start planning for. So I think it was great. You guys were very clear, and your plan was, again, like, even the nitty gritty isn't figured out yet, but the overall aspect parents can start thinking about. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Jody, can you change our meeting from
the 21st of August? So instead of meeting on next week, which is the 28th, right?
Correct.
You're going to meet
on the 4th.
August 4th.
Guys, what time? Back to 7? Or what do you guys want to do? Or 7:30? What do we usually do?
I'm fine, 7 or 7:30, whatever.
That's That's fine.
Whatever works for everybody. I'm flexible.
7?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's do 7.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Great. I can go back to vacation. All in favor?
Bye.
Bye.
Aye.
Bye. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone. Motion
everybody.
carries.
Thanks
Bye.
so much. Thank
Bye.
you.
Enjoy, Carrie.
Thank you. Bye.